Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. We begin in Pyongyang, where Xi Jinping's June 8th and 9th visit to Kim Jong Un is the biggest strategic move on the board. The ceremony had all the North Korean state pageantry classics: red carpet, guard of honor, Kim Il Sung Square, giant portraits, balloons, children with flowers, and slogans about unbreakable friendship. But behind the theater, this is a leverage play. China is trying to remind Kim that Beijing is still the senior patron in the room, even as Russia has been doing its best late-stage Soviet tribute act by buying influence through war, weapons, and desperation. Xi's visit is his first to North Korea since 2019 and his first foreign trip of the year. That matters. Beijing chooses these trips carefully, and this one says China is worried about where Kim is drifting. Since North Korea began supporting Russia's war in Ukraine with troops and ammunition, Moscow has given Pyongyang money, food, oil, aid, and technical support. The 2024 Putin-Kim Mutual Defense Pact added even more weight. For Kim, this is a very nice little diplomatic shopping spree. Russia needs him, China needs him contained, and Washington still wants some pathway back to talks. That gives Kim more room to maneuver than he has had in years. China remains North Korea's most important economic partner. North Korea gets most of its imports from China, including food, fuel, electronics, machinery, vehicles, and textiles. Bilateral trade rose 22% in the first 2 months of 2026, compared with the same period last year. Chinese exports to North Korea hit about $2.3 billion last year, the highest level in 6 years. So Beijing still has the wallet, the roads, the ports, and the border. But Russia has walked into the room with a wartime checkbook and a security pact, and that changes the vibe fast. For Xi, North Korea is useful as a buffer. Beijing does not want a unified, democratic, pro-Western Korea sitting on China's border with U.S. forces potentially pushed farther north. But China also does not want Kim acting like he just got handed the aux cord at a nuclear crisis party. A more confident Russia-backed North Korea could provoke Seoul or Tokyo, tighten U.S.-Japan-South Korea security cooperation, and push the region into exactly the kind of alliance coordination Beijing hates. The nuclear issue is where the old script is really breaking down. In 2019, Xi could still talk about denuclearization without sounding like he was reading from a museum plaque. Now, North Korea is making the opposite point loudly. On June 4th, North Korean state media said Kim unveiled a nuclear materials production factory and released images that appeared to show him at a uranium enrichment facility. Pyongyang claimed its weapons-grade nuclear material production capacity has more than doubled in 5 years. South Korean officials assess North Korea may now produce enough fissile material for 10 to 20 additional warheads per year. Another estimate puts North Korea's arsenal at about 60 warheads, up from 50 a year ago. Then Kim Yo Jong came in with the family business message: North Korea's nuclear-armed status is irreversible. That is not subtle. That is not a negotiating wink. That is Pyongyang saying the nuclear arsenal is now treated as a permanent feature of the regime's survival strategy. Russia appears comfortable with that reality. China is not thrilled, but it is also not willing to push so hard that Kim runs deeper into Putin's arms. And President Trump has referred to North Korea as a nuclear power while saying he is willing to meet Kim. The problem is, Kim says talks require Washington to drop denuclearization demands. So the table exists, but the price of sitting down has gone way up. Now shift to Taiwan, where Beijing is applying pressure in a very different but equally strategic way. During the June 2nd to 5th Computex trade show in Taipei, global tech giants including NVIDIA, Intel, and SK Group were emphasizing Taiwan's role as the center of the AI hardware universe. At the same time, China was putting military and Coast Guard pressure around the island. Taiwan's defense ministry reported 79 Chinese warplanes operating near Taiwan during the show, and China conducted another joint combat readiness patrol. That timing matters because Taiwan's security is now inseparable from the global AI economy. Taiwan is home to TSMC, the world's largest contract chipmaker and a supplier to NVIDIA and Apple. It is also home to Foxconn, NVIDIA's largest server maker. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said the company plans to spend about $150 billion annually in Taiwan, up from around $10 billion to $15 billion 5 years ago. AMD's Lisa Su has announced more than $10 billion in Taiwan AI investment. Huang talked about diversification and redundancy, but he also called Taiwan the epicenter of the ecosystem. That is the whole dilemma in one sentence. Everyone wants resilience, but the magic still happens in Taiwan. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te framed it directly. He said Taiwan will safeguard peace and stability across the strait and maintain the status quo, calling that Taiwan's responsible commitment to the global technology supply chain. That is not just political language. It is Taiwan telling the world, your AI boom, your data centers, your chips, your servers, your next generation everything. All of that runs through a security environment Beijing is actively trying to stress. The newer Chinese move is the Coast Guard push east of Taiwan. Defense Minister Wellington Koo called it a provocative act and cognitive warfare. His point was that Beijing is trying to stretch the idea of Chinese jurisdiction like a spider web over Taiwan's eastern waters. China described the activity as a special maritime traffic law enforcement operation tied to anger over Japan and the Philippines opening talks on maritime boundaries. Taiwan sent Coast Guard vessels to warn away Chinese ships and said 4 Chinese government vessels were expelled from restricted waters. The strategic takeaway: China is expanding gray zone pressure beyond the familiar hotspots and testing how far it can normalize presence around Taiwan without triggering a larger crisis. There is also a defense industrial angle. Computex included drone companies, and Lai has made drones a key part of Taiwan's modernization agenda. Palmer Luckey, the founder of Anduril, toured the show and said around 30 Taiwanese companies are now in Anduril's supply chains. Anduril is jointly developing a missile with Taiwan. So Beijing is not only watching Taiwan's chip ecosystem, it is watching the island become more relevant to defense technology supply chains too. On the economic front, China still has real export strength, but there are stress fractures underneath. A Reuters poll forecasts China's May exports rising 15% year over year in dollar terms, helped by front-loaded orders, Gulf War energy concerns, and demand for semiconductors and AI-related components. Imports were expected to rise 25%, with the trade surplus forecast at $92.1 billion. Strong numbers, yes, but May factory data showed a sharp drop in new export orders after April hit a 2-year high. That suggests some buyers rushed orders forward and may now be sitting on inventory. The bigger issue is China's familiar overcapacity machine. Weak domestic demand leaves Beijing leaning heavily on exports. Critics argue China imports components, re-exports finished goods, and uses subsidies to grab market share in ways that squeeze other emerging manufacturers. The OECD reportedly found nearly 60% of Chinese firms' market share gains can be explained by subsidies. A U.S. Federal Reserve paper found China's trade surplus, measured against global GDP, has topped 1% and shows little sign of narrowing. Translation: this is not just trade data. This is industrial strategy with global consequences. Beijing is also tightening the screws at home. China's securities regulator tried to calm investors after a crackdown on illegal cross-border securities trading, saying existing offshore accounts would not be forcibly closed or liquidated. The assets involved are estimated around $54 billion. Firms including Tiger, Futu, and Longbridge have told onshore Chinese clients they can no longer open new accounts, add positions, or move fresh money starting in mid-June. That is capital control with a polite jacket on. Finally, China's Ministry of State Security warned that foreign intelligence services are using paid research and part-time photography to collect details at air shows, ship shows, and technology exhibitions. The examples were specific: landing gear, radar rotation, missile measurements, even high-resolution images of coatings and rivets. Beijing's message is that public information can become classified insight when stitched together. And on the military modernization side, Chinese reporting highlighted a new air defense system tested by the PLA's 73rd Group Army in Gobi Desert conditions, with foreign media identifying it as likely the HQ-16F. The tactical detail is less important than the signal. China is training, modernizing, and advertising readiness while tightening control over what outsiders can learn. Thanks for listening and helping grow this community. If you're getting value from the show, a quick review or comment helps surface it to others who care about this space. For deeper coverage, we publish a daily intel brief on Substack, restrictedhandling.substack.com, where we expand on Russia and China and provide additional insights on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Have a great day.